Welcome to Against the Spread, where we pick games for you against the spread. We didn't do that well last week, but overall we're doing really well this year. So let's not focus on the recency bias and focus on the games upcoming, Gilo. And we've got an AFC West matchup that's probably a little bit more exciting now than when I saw it to start the season on the Thursday night schedule. The Chargers, the terrible special teams Chargers, go to the Jekyll and Hyde Las Vegas Raiders, where the Raiders are favored by 3.5. I think I've gotten both of these teams wrong literally every week. So I will give you the floor first. Where are you leading?
Well, the thing about this game, even though the Raiders are kind of Jekyll and Hyde, they've been more consistent over the last few weeks, but they've been consistently bad. And they just give up a ton of points. This one just feels like one of those games that the Chargers are going to come out and Justin Herbert's going to do his thing on national television as the Raiders defense, which got their defensive coordinator fired after the game on Sunday after giving up 44 points to the Colts. It just feels like they're going to struggle again. I don't think that's going to make a huge difference. So I'm leaning, given the fact that the Raiders are 3.5 point favorites, I'm going to lean with the Chargers. And I think they can either win this game outright or at least keep it within a field goal.
I'm going to go with the Chargers too. Don't have a great read on either team, so I'll take the points. I do know that the quarterback the Chargers were willing to move on from just lit up the Raiders. And the quarterback they moved on to has looked better than advertised. And we've had a Josh Allen coming out party on national TV. We've had, in a way, like, I don't know if it's a Baker Mayfield coming out party, but maybe a confirmation that he's not a bust, if anything, even in a loss. I think you're right. This feels like a Herbert national TV coming out party, and that's why I'm going to go with the Chargers in the Thursday nighter. Right. Buffalo, with the GM with the new contract, goes to Denver with a GM who probably would be best used on the field playing quarterback for the team. Buffalo is favored by 6.5, even though they're on the road. Who do you like in this one?
Yeah, before last week, I would have said I was taking the Bills in this one, no question. It feels like, especially after Sunday night, Josh Allen and the Bills are probably playing their best football of the season, definitely their most complete football of the season. And it's hard to imagine many teams outside of, the Chiefs or the Saints at their best being able to take care of the Bills. But the Broncos have been a little bit of a tough out over the last month outside of that game where they had zero quarterbacks. They've got 2 wins as underdogs and a cover against KC, and Drew Lock is coming off his best game as a pro. That said, this spread at 6.5 is one that I'm comfortable with enough taking the Bills. If it were a bit more, and that's something worth monitoring as the week goes on, if this gets to 7.5 or something in that range, I would definitely think about taking the Broncos. But at this number, I like Buffalo.
I like Buffalo as well. Not necessarily a primetime game. It won't be a re-coming out party for Josh Allen, but this is a random Saturday 4:30 Eastern game as the NFL looks to continue to give you football on all days of the week this year, and I'm quite frankly here for it. But I do love this matchup. Specifically, Vic Fangio and that Broncos defense is going to blitz you getting off the bus. Well, the third best QBR in the league against the blitz is Josh Allen. And with a talented wide receiver group, I like them to put up points and win this one comfortably. So 6.5 is not scaring me whatsoever. In a Saturday night primetime game, Teddy Bridgewater goes to Aaron Rodgers, where the Packers are favored at home by 8.5 points. Who do you like in this one?
I really like the Packers in this one. I think, it's a bit tough picking this one early in the week. We are picking on Tuesday, but it feels like Christian McCaffrey is probably done for the year. And that's really always the wild card with the Panthers, especially as we're getting closer to the end of the year and we're kind of seeing who this team really is. If McCaffrey were to be in this game, I'd lean with the Panthers just because the Packers aren't a great run defense and they give up a lot of big plays to running backs like McCaffrey. But if he's out and it's just Teddy Bridgewater trying to make things happen on his own, it's going to be really tough to keep up with Aaron Rodgers, who is playing like an MVP, and the offense that's scoring the most points in the league right now. So I feel pretty comfortable taking the Packers, given the fact that the Panthers are going to continue to be shorthanded.
Yeah, and you mentioned McCaffrey. He is a running back, so you'd think he'd impact them in the running game. But Mike Davis has done a really good job, and they've still continue to struggle specifically on offense. And outside of Robbie Anderson, Teddy Bridgewater doesn't really have a consistent target offensively, and he's really struggled after starting the year pretty strong. For all those reasons, I think the Packers at 8.5 is a nice, comfortable number. Where I'm willing to bet on them and their offense, and the fact that they're so multi-dimensional on offense that I can see them getting a big lead with Rodgers and then just handing the ball to Aaron Jones and running out the clock. So another team that I've had struggles getting a read on, the Chicago Bears. I don't really know what to make of them. I like Mitch Trubisky, apparently is winning, but when you watch the tape, he's not playing all that well, but he's playing better than what they were getting out of Nick Foles. They go to Minnesota, and the Vikings are 3-point favorites after the line opened at 6, which I think is a lot considering the teams have the same record and are in the same division. But is 3 too much for Minnesota at home?
It's really tough. I mean, you talked about the Bears. They're an impossible. I don't even think they know what they're going to get out of themselves every week. And, Trubisky outplaying Deshaun Watson. How we would have never been able to predict that. I'm beginning to feel like Chicago is my kryptonite. I can't remember the last time I picked a game the Bears were playing incorrectly. They're just an impossible team to nail down. And maybe I'm a bit too paranoid here and I'm jaded, but I feel like this is exactly the time where I'd pick Chicago because they're coming off an impressive performance and then they lay another dud. So I'm going to go the other way and I'm going to take the Vikings and I'm going to bank on the Bears being the inconsistent team they've been all year long. And give me the Vikings, and maybe they're able to hang around in the playoff picture just a little bit longer.
I'm going to go the other way. I'm going to go with the Bears because out of anything in this game, the thing I trust the most is that Bears defense. And I don't trust Kirk Cousins, especially as he had another, inconsistent performance last week. And this is basically the bowl to find out which one of these teams is going to be taken off the in the hunt board when we look at playoff matchups, and they'll no longer be in the hunt, even though we both know that they're not making the playoffs because the only real route for them to make the playoffs is winning their division, and that's not happening. So having said that, I think Chicago stays on that board 1 week longer than Minnesota, and if anything, if Minnesota wins, I think it's going to be less than a field goal game. It's going to be pretty close. So I'll take the points and I'll take the Bears. So Tampa Bay goes to Atlanta, and they're favored by 6. I know Atlanta, had a pretty good week, but this line really surprises me. It started at 1.5, and if you got that number, good for you. It's now at 6. How do you feel about it right now?
I don't feel good about that number. That's for sure. I'd rather have it at 1.5. Right. This Bucs team is. It's one, the more that I watch them play, the more I become unsure of whether, they're even a good team or a threat to be a danger in the playoffs for sure. The defense had a big game against the Vikings. They were able to get a bunch of sacks of Kirk Cousins and some turnovers, but the offense is still not able to take advantage of the defensive plays the way that you think with all those players on it. But we don't know how they're going to play against the Falcons. The Falcons are an up and down team, one of those many inconsistent teams, and the Bucs are now going to face them in 2 of the last 3 games. So we don't really have an idea of how these two teams stack up. So I'm going to lean with the Bucs, who I know at least can create some turnovers and maybe get some defensive touchdowns and create some points. Whereas the Falcons, you just don't know what you're going to get week in and week out. So I'll take the Bucs and hope they win by a touchdown.
Yeah, I'm taking the Bucs as well. And every week there is a game where at 1:45 Eastern, I look at the scores and I'm like, I'm going to hate myself that I'm going to have to pay attention to this for another 2.5 hours. And I feel like this is going to be that game. I can see Atlanta getting up early and making this real difficult for TV to win, never mind cover. Tampa Bay is 6-1 when Brady doesn't turn over the football. Atlanta defensively, all they really can do to get off the field is turn you over. So I do have some worry that the issues with turnovers may haunt them, but they're just so much more talented that I still have to lean with Tampa Bay. Would I, to your point, appreciate 1.5 at this number for sure. But even at 6, I'm going to go with the Buccaneers because they literally, have to win to make sure that they control, their playoff destiny. Where Atlanta, is not going to the postseason. I feel like at this point with an interim coach is where they start saying 1, 2, 3 Cancun in the huddle and pack it in. The Jacksonville Jaguars are certainly not going to the postseason, and the Baltimore Ravens kept their postseason hopes alive with a big comeback against the Browns. 14 points is what this number is at for Baltimore at home against a struggling Jacksonville team. Is that too many points for you?
It's one I definitely have to think twice about, just because, Monday night was amazing. It was so much fun. That's the Baltimore Ravens team we were expecting to see all season long. And finally we get this offensive explosion and the drama with Lamar going out, coming back in and leading that team to the victory. And they delivered that performance and was what was definitely their biggest game of the season. But I'm not entirely ready to forget the struggles we've seen from this team the rest of the year. 1 week doesn't necessarily mean that all of the issues are fixed. And so if they're able to do it again, I'll be completely ready to buy in, and maybe I'd be ready to take them against a team like Jacksonville by 2 touchdowns. Based on the recent body of work outside of Monday night, plus the fact that the Jags have been a pretty tough out against the spread over the last few weeks, I'm going to take Jacksonville just because that spread's a bit too big.
I'm going to go the other way. I'm going to take Baltimore. And I know they've struggled, and they're now with the win over Cleveland. They're just 2-4 against teams with winning records. But the Jacksonville Jaguars are not one of them. And they have enough talent to beat up on a bad team. And they lead the league in rushing yards outside the tackles. And not only the injuries that Jacksonville has in their linebacking core and just the lack of speed in their defensive ends, I could see, this being a monster, rushing game for Baltimore in the same way that, Tennessee has had some big rushing games against Jacksonville. So I think that 14 is not too much for me. I think Baltimore still has a lot of work ahead of them to make sure that they do get into the postseason in the AFC North. But I think this is going to be a big win, knowing that they got to have it. I think there's going to be a good performance coming off the vibes of having a big win against the Browns. So just when I was back on the New England Patriots bandwagon, they put up their worst offensive performance in the Bill Belichick era. Miami looked good in a loss. They're favored by 2.5 points. Who wins this AFC East matchup?
This is probably the most perplexing spread of the week so far, and it seems like such an obvious pick that I'm second guessing whether it's an obvious pick. The Dolphins are the better team, and they've proven under Brian Flores to be a team that, even when the Patriots are good, can give Bill Belichick some problems. Plus, they're coming off, like you said, a good performance against the Chiefs, where they hung around probably way longer than they should have. And the Patriots, they're a high school offense that's coming off, like you said, the worst performance offensively of the Bill Belichick era. So I feel like I'm missing something with the spread, but I'm undoubtedly going to take the Dolphins.
I am as well. And a lot of people will now, retroactively ascribe the end of the Patriots dynasty to them losing against Tennessee. Tom Brady throwing a late ill-advised pick. I'd actually go a little bit earlier. I think the end of the dynasty is when they had Miami at the end of the regular season to control their playoff seeding, and they lost. They couldn't beat Fitzpatrick led offense, and they really couldn't beat Brian Flores. And I see the exact same thing happening. Just now, Miami has a lot more talent because they were really good in free agency, and they actually stole some Patriots in free agency, and because the injuries and the COVID absentees and the losses in free agency, like, just quite frankly, New England's not very good anymore. And in Miami, it may not be good yet, but they're on the way. And I think this will be a statement win for them. So I'll take them at 2.5. So the aforementioned Tennessee Titans that everyone was high on because of their playoff run a year ago, but they've been up and down this regular season. They will be going to the postseason most likely. Where they'll start, who knows? And if they take care of business against Detroit, that'll go a long way in clearing up that picture. They're favored by 8.5 points over the Lions. Who do you like?
I think the Matthew Stafford injury looms large in this game, and especially when you're picking it against the spread, because I think the Titans can and should win this game against a very average Lions team. But Tennessee's defense is not great. They can't get a lot of pressure after the quarterback. And if Stafford were playing in this game, I think it would be one where they'd be able to hang around and maybe get a backdoor cover like they did against the Packers this past weekend. But Chase Daniel gives the Lions a very different look. I don't have the same confidence in him being able to make the throws Stafford can make to keep the Lions in a game like this one. So if it's Daniel, and it sounds like it's going to be, the rib injury is just such a tough one for a quarterback, I expect the Titans and Derrick Henry will grind this one out, and it'll probably be covered and done by the fourth quarter.
Yeah, I think it's done early as well. And I'm actually looking at it through the lens of the other side, and in Detroit defensively, specifically their secondary. They lost their best cover player in the offseason via free agency, and now their secondary, which wasn't good in the first place, is decimated with injuries. And so the amount of man that Tennessee forces you to play because of that play action game, because you're stacking the box against Derrick Henry, makes Brown a real nice option for Tannehill in one-on-one coverage, and that is the reason why I think Tennessee wins this easily, is because no one can really stop the run against Tennessee, and now Detroit can't cover. So I see a lot of points for the Titans. Houston goes to Indy. The Colts looking to be the other team to really push the Tennessee Titans for the division. They're favored by 7 with Houston coming into town. Who do you like in this one?
I've struggled with this one, I have to be honest, because my first reaction is, based on last week's results, go with the Colts. Houston was shellacked by the Bears, like we mentioned earlier. Trubisky outplayed Watson, and then the Colts dominated the Raiders, which we mentioned as well. But just 2 weeks ago, the Texans were a botched snap on the goal line away from beating this Colts team. And that not much has really changed on those two rosters outside of what happened last week. So in-division games are weird, and they get weird results, and you kind of got to throw away what happened last week. So I'm going to take the Texans just because that spread's just a bit too big.
So I'm actually, not going to touch the stove again, knowing that it's hot. I had it in my mind last week. Listen, Watson is that good. He will be able to mask all the issues that they have, and they'll be okay on offense. And that wasn't the case. You just look at their receiver core. Hopkins is playing in another division, playing really well. Cooks is hurt. Fuller is suspended. When Kiki Kuti is your number one receiver, I don't really care if you brought like Joe Montana back in his prime. Like, there's only so much you can do. And the Colts defense at the best of times is really stout, and the secondary is playing really, really well. So I'm going to take the Colts to cover the 7 points in this one. So this pick will be pretty quick for me. San Fran goes to Dallas. The Niners are favorites by 2.5. And I know what you're saying if you watch this continually. Man, you have a stance of going against your beloved Cowboys, DJ, and they made you pay for it against the Bengals. Very true. But I won't be fooled by thinking the Cowboys are back. I'm going to take the Niners in this one. Who you got?
I'm surprised the Andy Dalton revenge game didn't swing your opinion on the Cowboys. I'm leaning the same way. The Niners still being ravaged by injuries. I don't think there's a team in the NFL right now that's had worse luck this year with injuries and having to move homes because of COVID-19 restrictions. It's just been a real tough season for the 49ers, but they've still been able to, despite all those things they've had to tough out, be an average team. And I think that comes down to coaching. They're really well coached on both sides of the ball, and they're able to compete despite everything that they've lost on the roster. And I don't have that same confidence in coaching with the Cowboys. They played a really bad Bengals team, and I think that had more to do with what we saw on Sunday. So I'm going to take the 49ers to be able to cover a fairly small spread here.
Yeah, it's the Aldon Smith revenge game, but I'm still taking the Niners.
Oh no, another revenge game now. I'm second guessing myself.
Um, well, I don't know who needs revenge in this one. Seattle is going to Washington, even though they're the road team. They're favored by 6. Who do you like in this one?
I think, like the Lions and Titans game, this depends a lot on who's going to start for the underdogs. And Alex Smith, it sounds like there was some good news this morning that they're optimistic he's going to be able to play in this game. And I think that makes all the difference. The Washington defense is going to make game-changing plays. They're going to have an impact, especially after we saw the Seahawks struggle against another NFC East defense a couple weeks ago. But the Washington offense, even though it's not out of this world with Alex Smith, it's at least serviceable and they can do the things they want to do. Dwayne Haskins isn't that guy, and he's shown that he's not able to pull those things off on offense. He's just not there yet, if he'll ever get there. So if Smith is in this game, like it sounds like he's going to, I'm going to take Washington. They've covered in 4 straight games now, and I think if Smith is back, they cover in 5 straight.
Yeah, this is very well a playoff preview, as Washington looks like they're in pole position to win the division, and Seattle, if they don't make a run and win the NFC West, will probably be the best record wildcard team, and will get the benefit of playing Washington. Having said that, I don't know how much of a benefit it is. Washington's defense, as you mentioned, is playing really well. They're top 6 in virtually every category that matters. And in the last 4 games, during this hot streak that they've had, they're holding opponents to 14 points. So basically all you're saying to your offense is go out and get 3 scores, some form or fashion. Ron Rivera, Jack Del Rio, 2 guys who are really good defenders in their own right and really good defensive coordinators and defensive coaches, has that defense playing well. Chase Young is an animal and a game wrecker. And for all those reasons, I think Washington can cover this spot at 6. Initially, when I saw this matchup, I go, oh yeah, Seattle, of course they're going to beat the Washington football team. But the more I thought about it, the more I was like, no, Washington could give them some problems. And so I'm going to lean with Washington to cover, if not upset outright. Speaking of giving people problems.
Yeah, speaking of upsets.
Jalen Hurts will be your starting quarterback for the 2nd week in a row as he goes to Arizona to face off with Kyler Murray. 6.5 points is the spread. Who do you like in this one?
It's a bit uncomfortable, this spread, because I do like the Eagles to be able to keep this one close, but I'm still a bit weary. All those problems we talked about last week, the bad offensive line. Now they just lost their backup right tackle in Jack Driscoll, so he's out for the season. So there's still all those problems with the Eagles offensive line and the offense, but I think Doug Peterson did a really good job of making the game simple for Jalen Hurts and for him to be able to use his talents, especially on the ground, against the Saints and make that a tougher game than we all expected it to be for the Saints. But 2 things in particular make me a bit weary about Philadelphia. Cardinals defense has done a great job against scrambling quarterbacks this year. They've kept most of them to under 50 yards. And the Eagles just lost 3 starters in their secondary in Rodney McLeod, Darius Slay, and Avonte Maddox. That's 2 starting corners and their starting free safety. And their other safety is a converted corner. So I'm really concerned about the secondary coming up against what could be a good offense in Arizona. Despite all that, I'm still going to go with Philadelphia because what I saw from that team was just a team that's not doing the bad things we expected to see. No sacks on Sunday, and the turnovers were down. So because of the big spread, I'm going to take the Eagles, but there are definitely some signs that it could go the other way as coaches get more tape on what Hurts and Peterson are doing.
Yeah, I think the no sacks is key.
For sure.
He dropped back 3 times and no sacks, and it's not as if he wasn't pressured. He was pressured 14 times, and they ended up getting 80 yards on those plays. That's so big to have a quarterback who is being smart with the football and being able to move, because the Eagles now have had 12 different offensive line combinations. And they may well add to that number as the season progresses, but the entire team, forget about the offense, the team looked different. The team looked like they had a lift and they had some belief. And Hurts is giving you 6.8 yards per play, and Wentz is giving you 4.8 yards per play. That's the difference between the Packers offense and the Bengals offense. Like, you're literally an entirely different team with Hurts playing quarterbacks. So I think it gives you some cap questions on what may or may not happen moving forward. But if Hurts, the guy that we saw at Oklahoma, who was really, really smart with the football, and in fact didn't really push it down the field as much as maybe you wanted to, if he protects the football, the thing that Wentz has struggled to do, this Eagles team is entirely different. And speaking of Hurts, in the exact same offense that Kyler Murray played in the same offense that Baker Mayfield played in, two guys who were early first-round picks, Jalen Hurts put up more yards and put up better numbers. So I certainly think he's proving that he is, a league average, if not better, NFL quarterback. And that's pretty much all this Eagles team is asking. Don't be terrible. Don't lose us the game before we have a chance to win it. So I like Philly to perform well against an Arizona team that has been less impressive in the last month of the season than they were in the first. I'm cursing you. I'm picking your Eagles.
Yeah. Well, hopefully it's not the Bills' impact that we've seen in the past.
Right. And we got another massive spread. Memory serves, this might be the biggest we've had all year. And it is, of course, the New York Jets. You guessed it. There's 17-point dogs going to the Los Angeles Rams. Too many points for you?
I really, really, really dislike the size of the spread. And I thought, when I saw it, I thought for sure I was going to take the Jets. But the more that I thought about this one, and what the Rams did to New England and how bad the Jets were against Seattle, who has a really bad defense themselves, it just makes it impossible to find any reasons outside of the size of the spread to take the Jets as underdogs. So I'm going to take the Rams. I don't feel great about it. It's a huge spread, but I just can't take the Jets at this point in time, which, they're 3 weeks out from being done. I just don't know what else there is left for this team.
You really, really dislike the size of the spread. I really, really dislike the Jets. Like, there's nothing about the team that I find to be somewhat redeeming. The Rams have much more talent on defense, have much more talent on offense. The real question with the Rams is, are they going to play to the level of their talent? And they did a week ago, and I expect them to do in another AFC East matchup. So I'm going to take the 17. I had the exercise with myself where I said, okay, well, at what number are you uncomfortable with this being? And I'm not really sure what the answer is, but it's not 17. So I'm going to take the Rams.
That's fair.
So the Kansas City Chiefs, after having another up and down performance and another game that, probably was closer than some thought it was going to be, are in a game that should be close against, two of the teams who expect to be in the Super Bowl. Kansas City goes to New Orleans. The line is 4. No, we're not certain if Drew Brees is going to be playing. The Saints certainly have to have this game, but they also have to have Drew Brees healthy at the end of the year. Not knowing who's going to be playing, where are you leaning in this one?
Yeah, I have no inside info on this whatsoever, but I would be surprised if we saw Drew Brees in this game. There were reports that he tried to throw last week and was still feeling some pain. So I don't think there's any reason to risk it, even if it is the Chiefs. And like you said, the Chiefs have been a tough pick against the spread over the last few weeks. I think they're 5-0 straight up, but 0-5 against the spread in their last 5. But this is a Chiefs team that always seems to show up and show out in games like this, games where they're playing the best of the best and they have a statement to make. And I think that's exactly what this is. And in games like this, with a relatively small spread for the Chiefs, I tend to go with stellar offense over stellar defense. And so that's exactly what I'm going to do. I'm going to go with the Chiefs. I think they break that skid against the spread, because if Taysom Hill has to get into some kind of shootout with Patrick Mahomes, I just don't think he has the capability to do it. So give me the Chiefs.
Yeah, Taysom Hill is the prototype of the player who he put together their highlight tape and they look really, really good. But then when you watch their game tape, you're like, some drives where it seems like you shouldn't even be on the field. And I actually aside from obviously Drew Brees coming back, I actually feel like the Saints' best chance to win would be with Jameis Winston, because you know you're gonna have to put up points. You know it's gonna be a shootout, and the ball control, like, you know, win the field possession position game that the Saints have been playing, and really played to a T against the Broncos when they didn't have a quarterback. You're not going to be able to do that against the best quarterback in the world in Patrick Mahomes, because it doesn't really matter where he gets the ball, quite frankly, or how much time is left on the clock in any given situation. So yeah, I like the Chiefs in this game, even if Breeze comes back, his first real game action after an extended layoff. That wouldn't change how I feel about this game. So I'm going to take the Chiefs confidently regardless. All right, a Sunday nighter in which I'm not sure why it's a Sunday nighter.
And it was
the Browns.
It was flexed in the Sunday night.
Yeah, I mean, I get it.
Like we just talked about Chiefs Saints. Why didn't that get flexed?
That would have been a great option.
Yeah.
I know the Giants are, you know, a big market, but they're not a great team. But they're only 3.5-point underdogs against the Browns. Who do you like in this one?
Monday night's game, even though it was an amazing game for fans who were watching, it was a tough one for the Browns, and for Browns bettors who ended up losing to that terrible backdoor cover on the safety at the very end of the game.
Yes.
But not for us. I mean, we got to pick it early in the week at 1 for the Ravens, so good for us. But I think it was progress for the Browns, who in a big spot on a huge stage were able to move the ball really well, put together a ton of points against a good defense. And I think that's kind of the progress that I was looking for, at least when saying last week that I didn't fully trust the Browns yet. And on the flip side, the Giants are a mess offensively. I have Daniel Jones for some reason in one of my fantasy leagues. He got me 0.08 points. 0.0. That just says that's a perfect picture of where the Giants are offensively at this point. I know their defense is good, and that could result in this being a bit of a slugfest, but I still like the Browns to be able to run the ball down the Giants' throats and at least put up enough offense to out-offense what is a terrible Giants situation on that side of the ball.
Well, that is why we were coming to you for betting advice and not fantasy advice, because Daniel Jones in the first round of fantasy playoffs is not advisable. But you mentioned the quarterback, because to me this is all about the quarterbacks in really both offenses, both teams, new head coaches, new offensive systems, new offensive staffs. And, you know, we've seen the Browns get better throughout the year. It seems like forever ago that they got the brakes beaten off them in week 1 by the Ravens. And now, you know, they probably should have beat the Ravens. And the Giants, you know, still haven't looked comfortable offensively, even though their effort is high week to week defensively. The Browns are much farther along under Kevin Stefanski, and I like them in the Sunday nighter. And last but not least, another primetime game where I'm not sure why.
Maybe least.
It's a primetime game.
Maybe least.
Yeah, probably least. I mean, Rams Jets might give it a run for its money.
True. Yeah.
But the Steelers, who have really struggled in the last 2 weeks, go against a team that has struggled all year in the Cincinnati Bengals. Pittsburgh favored by 13 points in this AFC North matchup. Where are you leaning?
It's another big one, and that does make me a bit weary of taking it. But after leaning on the Bengals are good against the spread thing over the last couple weeks, that hasn't worked out in my favor at all. I'm going to go with the Steelers. I know the offense is really struggling here, but I think this is kind of exactly the type of bounce back game that a team like the Steelers would need. And you know, they don't even necessarily need to really have a great offensive game to cover this spread. I could see them still scoring fewer than 20 points and still covering the spread, just because the Bengals offense is so bad at this point in time without Joe Burrow. So I'll take the Steelers, although it's a bit reluctantly, but I just can't pick the Bengals anymore.
Yeah, but that Steelers defense, after having such great depth to start the year, starting to get banged up, and they're gonna have to potentially score on defense to cover this spread, because you know they've got 3 straight game scoring under 20 points. And Roethlisberger coming off his third game passing under 200 yards. Their inability to run the ball consistently or even really try to run it, quite frankly, is why I'm worried about the Steelers team, why I think they're relatively anemic. So do I think they win? Certainly. But do I have enough confidence in what they're doing offensively and the ability to play complementary football to win by 14? No. Even against the Bengals, I'm going to take the 13-point spread and hope that the Steelers continue to struggle, and this one's relatively close. But that's what I think. That's what Gilo thinks. What do you think? Let us know. Be sure to like, favorite, share, subscribe. Hit us up in the comments. And we've seen some comments on Twitter as to why you think our individual picks are generally wrong. People don't tweet us to say they agree. But we love the interaction, so keep it coming and enjoy the games.